Well, welcome to Family Tech Talk Night. My name is Lynette Owens. I'm the founder and global director of Trend Micro's Internet Safety for Kids and Families program. We have been hosting this program in collaboration with PTO Today for 11 years. And while Trend Micro is one of the world's leading companies that develop security software and services to help keep people safe online, we founded the Internet Safety for Kids and Families program 13 years ago because we felt it was very important to start to educate not just parents, but kids as well on how to use the internet in safe, responsible, and positive ways. And so this is a program we've been offering free to communities in 20 countries for the last 13 years. And we're very happy to be joined by you tonight for what I hope will be a great conversation. If you have just joined us, say hello in the chat. Tell us where you're from. If you'd like to listen in Spanish, please select the globe icon and pick Spanish as your audio channel, and you will hear my colleague Marcela de la Garma in Spanish tonight. All right, so I'd like to start first by saying hello to everyone who's here. And actually, before I do that, again, submit your questions anytime using the Q&A, not the chat. We'll be able to see it better in the Q&A. When you leave tonight, a page will be displayed to you. That page is a very short survey, and I encourage you to fill that out for us. Tell us what we're doing okay and tell us what we could do better. We will be continuing this work for foreseeable future, and we want to make sure it's useful for you. So with that, couple of things. I am dialing in from the Boston, Massachusetts area. So good evening to all of you. I know we have people here from coast to coast. I've actually got two children who are a little bit older now, 18 and 15, but having done this work for 13 years, I got to see them grow up with this very powerful tool, the internet, that I never knew growing up. So I'm going to share with you some of those learnings and also a lot of other information based on our work and our collaborations with other organizations over the years. I'd like to say a hello to all of you dialing in. I know some of you have already identified yourselves in the chat, but welcome to all of the schools who are with us tonight. On the very right-hand column, you'll see an attendance code. Make note of this. It's actually easy to remember. It's today's date, 10/27/21, dash 2 numbers that are for your school. If your PTO or PTA leader or your school principal requires you to provide, verification that you were here tonight, this is your code that you can provide to them for that purpose. I will show this again later on, so don't worry if you don't see it or didn't get a chance to write it down. So I want to also get to know you a little bit better. I know the places that you're from, but I want to know a little bit more about you. So if you will, using the poll options, please answer this question. How old is your oldest child? Are they A, 5 or older, B, 6 to 10 years old, C, 11 to 14 years old, or D, 15 or older? How old is your oldest child? I'll just leave that on for a couple seconds more. We have 2 age groups kind of vying for the leadership position here. How old is your oldest child? All right, I'm going to go ahead and stop it right here. So we have a pretty close, well, it looks like there is a tie between those of you whose oldest children are 6 to 10 years old and those of you whose oldest child is 11 to 14 years old. So, and some of you obviously have older and some younger than that. So great. I think you're in the wonder years, and there's some really interesting challenges that we will hopefully address for you tonight. So I do also want to know What are you most interested in discussing tonight? Is it A, managing screen time for my kids? B, helping my kids stick to age-appropriate content? C, dealing with online bullying or hate? D, ideas for positive uses of the internet? Or E, I'm not sure, just here to learn something new. Which of these are you most interested in talking about tonight? I'll just give that a couple of seconds and give you a chance to answer. I will say that A has been a concern of lots of people because of the period of history that we're in right now, where we're always at home, we're always online. But I'm going to stop the poll here and just say it looks like it didn't rise to the top for you. What did rise for the top for you is B, helping my kids stick to age-appropriate content. So this really helps me understand where I should spend a little bit more time in our conversation tonight. We will touch on all of these things, but we will emphasize the areas that you have actually said was most important to you. Great. So it's been a really challenging time. I'm sure you've heard that a million times. And because of it, a lot has also changed with respect to everything, but definitely with respect to our relationship with technology. In fact, maybe you started using technology in ways that you weren't before the pandemic, or never envisioned that you would before the pandemic. And the same is true for your kids. Perhaps you said yes to an app that you may have wanted to put off for a while, or got them a device that you weren't planning on this soon. Whatever the case may be, it has changed our relationship with technology as a whole. But what has not changed is that our children still need our guidance. And it's really great to see so many of you here tonight, because you obviously believe that. And that the risks also have not changed. So it is important that we help our children identify what those risks might be and how to prevent them. But the benefits of technology obviously also became more apparent for us over the past 18 months, especially if some of you did have children who were not in an in-person school situation for some period of time in the last academic year. So that's why it's important for us to make sure that teaching children about good digital citizenship stays a priority, never goes away. And when we talk about digital citizenship, what we mean are 4 things. We should be talking about risks and how to avoid them. Being safe online is really important, not just for young people, but for adults as well. But we have to remember there are other parts of what being a good digital citizen means. It also includes digital literacy. How do I actually do these things? If I know that protecting privacy is important, where are the privacy settings? How do I know how to use them? What settings are the most appropriate? How do I find credible information online? Which are the better sources when I'm trying to do homework or even just understand what's going on in the world? How do I behave towards others online and in online communities? What are the rules of engagement within those kinds of spaces? And finally, mastery. This is a little bit different because very often when we talk to kids about using technology, it's really often a long list of what not to do. We have to remember that it's equally important to talk to kids about what they should be doing with technology. What are positive and productive uses of technology that can benefit them, others, or the world around them? So we're going to talk about all of these things tonight. And we like to organize the conversation under these 4 pillars. The first is be online. How do we help our kids? How do we set them up so they can be online and be successful? The second is, While they're there, how can we help them be safe? The third, how can we help them be kind while they're there? And finally, how can we help them be savvy? And when we talk about being online, we're going to talk about how do I set up the environment, set the rules, and set a good example for them. When we talk about being safe, we will talk about protecting privacy, personal information, and even our physical selves. When we talk about being kind, this is very often about how you treat others, but we're going to talk about why directing kindness towards oneself is just as important, and how can we do that for our children. And finally, being savvy is all about encouraging good habits and encouraging good uses. So let's start with setting up the environment. You know, this is, let's start with the easy one, which is around for their physical health, you know, making sure that, especially if they're starting to use technology in increasing blocks of time, longer periods of time, you're protecting things like your eyes, making sure the lighting is appropriate. The 30-30-30 rule is to take a break every 30 minutes and look away, perhaps out the window, 30 feet away for 30 seconds. Something you could set an alarm or some kind of reminder to do for your kids, but also you, by the way, if you're working from home quite a bit or on screens. And investing in blue light glasses, they're not expensive. I use them. I'm not using mine right now, but I do use them throughout the workday because very real damage can happen to our eyes because of the blue lights being emitted by screens. So you can even get children-sized ones, adult-sized ones on Amazon. They're not that expensive. You know, I've talked to families who bought them in bulk for the entire family to make sure we don't damage our eyes. We work with the Digital Wellness Lab, who recently published a study that kids were starting to exhibit things like headaches and neck aches because they were using screens so much. So, you know, encouraging good posture and how they're sitting, feet flat on the floor, and so on. Make sure that they're not sort of hunched over in really awkward positions for long periods of time, because that can lead to things like headaches and back and neck aches. And just getting up and moving, making sure they're not on it long and too long, or if they have to be, making sure they, you know, take breaks. By the way, this applies to all of us as adults as well. Beyond the physical setup, there's also now, we're going to talk a little bit about technology here. First, around the network in your house. So if you haven't already done it, I'm sure most of you have a router in your house because you have Wi-Fi in the house. But when you bought that router, it came with a password. And very often, we never change the password. So if that router of yours has a password that you have not changed in a while, I highly recommend you do that. And do it with some frequency. That will help protect you from people trying to, you know, get access to your Wi-Fi, especially if it's not a strong password. We'll talk about strong passwords in a minute. And the other idea is to actually separate your network. So I don't know if you know, but you can set up the main part of your Wi-Fi network and then a guest part. So we like to recommend that the children's devices that don't have sensitive information on them, like an Xbox or a Kindle reader or their own iPads or other tablets, put that on the guest network. And then anything that has sensitive information, if you're working from home, maybe the PC or desktop that has all your banking information or tax information, put that on the main network. The reason for this is ideally they have different passwords that if the children's devices are compromised in any way, it won't harm your more critical devices on your home network. Using a Wi-Fi extender helps to make the connectivity better around your house. So if everybody's home, for example, and you don't want to be able to hear each other while you're online, you know, make sure the Wi-Fi is good everywhere in your house. You can invest in an extender. And if you need, like tonight, I'm online, I tell my family, Please don't all stream videos and play video games with your friends online while I'm trying to do this session. It makes for definitely a better, more peaceful home environment. On security, I will go through this quite quickly, but make sure that every device in your home, including mobile devices, has security software on there. Especially now that we're always online, cyber criminals are far more active because they know we're here, and they'll do anything to try and, set things up so they fooled us to click on something or download something that we didn't mean to. But you will largely be protected from any of those tactics by those criminals if you've got security software on the devices, especially the ones your kids are using. And within security software, there's a feature called a firewall. Make sure that is turned on because that watches the traffic coming in and out of the device and it is like a bouncer saying, yes, this one can come in, and no, that one cannot. Passwords we'll talk about in a minute. Using two-factor authentication. Let me know in the chat, do you all know what two-factor authentication is or multi-factor authentication is? Go ahead and put it in the chat. Great. So if you have not turned this on, multi-factor authentication is basically like a second lock, like a password is the first, multi-factor is the second. Make sure you've turned that on the apps your kids are using. Roblox has it, Instagram has it, TikTok has it. If they're not on the apps your kids are using, make sure they are. And also for you, for any apps and devices you're using. Okay. And finally, if you are out of the home and connecting to the internet, don't ever use public Wi-Fi just on the open. Make sure you're using a protected channel, which is a virtual private network. So, for both virtual private networks and security software, if you want to know what some of the best ones out there, if you're not using them already, just do a search. I like to look at cnet.com as a resource for objective reviews. Trend obviously has products in both categories, but there's many great ones. Do a search and make sure you're using that, especially on your kids' devices too. On good habits, I will just say, update everything all the time. During the past year, especially during this pandemic when everyone's online, again, like I said, cyber criminals have been more active. So those updates very often are patching security holes. So make sure your kids' devices too are updating everything all the time. And on strong passwords, if those of you with younger children, if you want to practice good password skills with them, one idea is to come up with a sentence that they think is funny and use the first letter of each word as the password. Throw in a special character like an asterisk or an exclamation point, and throw in a number as well to help you. Obviously, the longer it is, the stronger it is. So it's easier to remember the sentence versus some random string of characters. And it's just a good way to get your kids thinking about the importance of strong passwords and how to create them. Finally, back everything up. So yeah, it's great if you use Google Cloud, if you use Apple iCloud, great. It gets expensive once you start to have to add more space. I'm a big believer you should also use a hard drive backup in addition to that, so that if either one of those is compromised, you've got a backup of the backup. I know some people have maybe just joined, and if you're just joining and want to listen to Spanish, please select the globe icon and pick Spanish as your channel and use the Q&A to ask questions. Okay, great. So let's talk about the tools, because so many of you overwhelmingly talked about, I want my children only looking at stuff that's appropriate for them. So I'm about to spend a little time on this, especially about the apps your kids love. So these tools, sometimes they're called parental controls. Sometimes they're called privacy tools. Sometimes they're called security tools. And even in one case, they're called digital wellness tools. These tools help you not only filter content that's age appropriate for your kids, they can also help you do things like monitor what they're actually doing online, or manage the amount of time that they're spending on a particular app, and so on. So you'll find them both in devices as well as apps. You can get them through your ISP. You can buy them as standalone products, and even in some cases in your routers, you have the capability to do this. I'm going to highlight five things here that are most heavily used by most children. The first is Apple devices. Anyone have kids using Apple devices like iPads, iPhones? Does anyone use an iPod Touch anymore? I don't even know. I found my iPod the other day. I couldn't believe it. I was like, I forgot. All this did was play music, an iPod. Great. So if you're not already familiar, Apple came out with a great setting called screen time. Screen time allows you, it's under settings, it's called screen time. If you create an Apple account for each of your children underneath your own, you are able to set it up so that for each child, and you're seeing here my own phone here and my two kids, you set up each child, and you can do things like see how often they use the phone. You know those Sunday reports you get, the Sunday little alert you get, you've been using your device, either your screen time was up 16% this last week, and you feel super guilty. But you can do things like see how many times they even picked up the phone, how long they were spending on Instagram, and so on. But in addition to seeing that, you can also start to limit how much time they're spending on a particular app. You can even limit the kinds of apps they're allowed to download or movies they're allowed to view through the iTunes store. And for those of you who are not Android users, any Android families out there? Kids using, I guess, an Android phone or Chromebooks, or your own, not your school's. Any Android families out there? If you are, Google also created a similar tool. It's called Google Family Link. Okay, it's a separate app. It's not a setting like Apple settings. Google Family Link is a separate app that allows you to do many of the same things that I just talked about with Apple devices. So filtering the age of apps that they're allowed to download, limiting screen time, and even tracking where they physically are if they've got a mobile device, for example. Quiz question for you. What app does Google own that is all about videos? Kids love to watch videos on this app. What app does Google own? Great. Okay, we have several right answers. The answer is YouTube. So yes, you'll be able to do a lot more with YouTube, both through the Google Family Link, but also because this March, they introduced a brand new thing called the YouTube supervised account. And this basically allows you to do multiple levels of filtering depending on your child's age and, frankly, your feeling about their maturity and readiness to see stuff on YouTube. In the past, it was either YouTube for kids, which was really the youngest kids, or it was everything. Either they were exposed to very little or all of it. And thankfully, they introduced this earlier this year. So you can choose Explore, which means they get to see a little bit more. They say this is ideally for ages 8 to 10-ish. Or you can pick Explore More, that's like 11 to 14. And then most of YouTube, which is 15 to 17, but not quite 18 plus. Okay, so take a look at that. That's available to all parents, not just Android families. This is something all parents can now use to make sure that your children using YouTube, because they all do, are only seeing things that you feel is age appropriate for them. Okay, look up that YouTube supervised accounts. Anyone ever hear of this little app called TikTok? Anyone letting their kids use TikTok? Annoying. TikTok is annoying. I'm going to see, I know I'm going to see a lot of yeses and nos in the chat. It's a very polarizing app, I will say. So at some point, whether or not your kids are using it today, there will be a point that they will. Okay, not to scare you, but I do applaud TikTok for introducing last year at the height of the beginning of the pandemic, something called TikTok family pairing. This is a great way for you and your child to ease into the TikTok experience. How does it work? Basically, you need to download TikTok on one of your devices and then the device that the child will use. And for the device you're using, you're going to find a setting called digital well-being. And once you go there, you select family pairing and you designate each of the devices as either parent or child. Once you are in there as a parent, you can actually limit how much time they spend on it. You can exclude content that's going to be really not appropriate for kids, younger kids. And you can limit who is even allowed to message them through the app. The other thing TikTok did last year is they were the first, and many have followed since, they were the first to have the highest level of privacy settings for anyone under the age of 17 using the app, between 13 and 17. And so you still should check it to make sure it's set the way that you feel is okay. But that is not true of all games and apps that your children use. It just isn't. Instagram has now followed their example, and I believe a couple of other apps have also followed suit. But just know that is by default on for your kids. Anybody's kids using Roblox? I'm sure there are some people out there whose children are using Roblox. For those of you who are not familiar with Roblox, Roblox is not a game. Roblox is a platform for a community of people who both play games but also create games. And it can be a really wonderful experience. It can be used in really creative and affirming ways, but a couple of things you should know. The first is that not everybody on it is kids. There are older people on there, and according to them, it's starting to age older over time. So the other thing about Roblox is you can open chat with people in the games. The games, some of them are really very benign. I think if any of you have heard of the Adopt Me game, I play this one with a bumblebee that just follows me around, and I just dig flowers and collect pollen, and then I get more bees. But you see other people's avatars moving around in this world, and you can chat with each other. So that part, you've got to warn your kids, don't just say anything, and you just don't know who you're necessarily communicating with. Now, Roblox has done a very good job through a combination of AI, artificial intelligence, as well as human moderators, so that certain phrases cannot be posted. So for example, a stranger cannot text your child in Roblox to say, hey, where do you live? That will never even be posted because they won't allow it. Or what's your phone number? Or how old are you? That kind of stuff. But even so, it's still important to remind our children we never know who we're really engaging with in these online spaces. Okay. Real quickly here, I just had a quick video that you should take some time to take a look at how to set their security settings, because there's a lot of limitations that you can set for your kids' Roblox experience. So if some of you have not familiarized with yourselves with it yet, you should. Okay, moving on. One more here that's been around for a while, but it's really starting to make the rounds. Anyone hear of Discord? Discord. If you haven't heard of it yet, you will. It's really quite popular now, even though, again, it's been around for a while. It's a platform that was mostly used by really heavy gamer communities. But now we know that there are lots of groups of younger children who basically set it up for chatting, creating chat rooms with friends. So if you're not, they're starting to do a more active job of promoting all of their safety settings. They really weren't that active, I would say 3-4 years ago. So familiarize yourselves. If your kids ask about it, do your homework about what is Discord. It's basically like a Uber messaging place. It's like I can set up all these chat rooms with different people. They call it servers, but or I can listen in on a bigger communities chatting about Harry Potter or the Marvel Cinematic Universe or some other thing that has lots of fans. So you can limit who can message them. You can also you can block users if you don't want to be connecting with them or them connecting with you. Okay, so if you haven't heard of Discord, just do a very quick search and you'll easily be able to figure out what it is. But it's not, there's nothing about it that is all that technically different from other messaging apps. It's just, kids just gravitate to different spaces that they think the grown-ups are not in. Okay. And finally, I'll just put a little plug in here. Last month we decided, of all this knowledge we've had working with communities all over the world, we felt all these great tools that you're using, all these settings, it's great. But we decided at no cost to anyone, we created a tool called Trend Micro Family that allows you to do a lot of these settings all in one place. Because today you'd have to go to every app and do it. So we're early stages of this, but we're starting. Our vision is to make it easier for you as parents. I don't have to go to Roblox. I don't have to go to Instagram. I can just do all of it in one place. So give it a try. tmfamily.care. I'd love to hear what you think. No cost to you. Now let's talk about setting rules. And I like to think about this in 5 buckets. You set the rules. But consider having your kids a part of that conversation. Not just in setting the rules necessarily, but what would the consequences be if they broke those rules? So you decide, what are they allowed to use first of all? If you're not sure about a new app, if they come home and say, can I use Discord? And you'd never heard of it before. Last year, 18 months ago, it was, I forgot that app's name, but there, your kid might come home and say, can I please download this game or this app? So do your homework. And if it hasn't been highly reviewed yet, I would be very suspicious of it. I would wait until it's been more highly reviewed and used before you say yes, because it's not that it's necessarily age inappropriate, but you're also not sure of things like how protected is your privacy, or what kind of personal information are they collecting throughout the usage of the app. So do your homework on that. And then once you say, okay, yes, you can use it, then you decide when and how long they're allowed to use it. When could be, not till all your homework is done, or not only on the weekends, whatever your rules are. We'll talk in a second about how long, because the second thing you were all concerned about in the poll I did was screen time. So how can we talk about screen time and manage it in a healthy way? And then where and with whom they're allowed to use it. Where it's interesting, because I've seen over the years, some conflicts can arise when, let's just say it this way, when another family's rules are different from yours. Okay, so you let your child go and play over at someone else's house. Maybe their kid's allowed to play the first-person shooter games, but you're not ready for that, right? So I think it's really important to tell your children, where are they, when they're in certain places, what is it they're allowed to do while they're there? Or what are they not allowed to do while they're there, and couple that with very explicit conversations with the other families saying, hey, just so you know, we're not really allowing these kinds of games yet. So, if they're going over to your house, can you please make sure they're not playing those kinds of games, right? So I will say here, let's talk about how long. And in terms of screen time, we are very big proponents of the 24-hour exercise that is promoted by the Digital Wellness Lab, which is out of the Boston Children's Hospital and the Harvard Medical. A lot of pediatricians who specialize in problematic interactive media use, where they see the really extreme cases of kids who just cannot separate from their devices, or they have a very unhealthy use of and dependency on that technology. But they actually advise that we talk to children about screen time in the context of a bigger picture. And the 24-hour exercise works like this. You can either just have a conversation with your child, or write it down, or fill out a pie chart with 24 slices, right? And you start off saying, okay, there's only 24 hours in a day. Now, what portion of that day, of that 24 hours, are we spending on things that support our physical health? So how many hours do we sleep? Have meals or help prepare them? Exercise, play a sport, ride a bike, go for a walk. How much time are we spending on things that support our physical health? On top of that, how much time are we spending that supports us as learners? So how many hours are we in school, doing homework? Maybe we're practicing an instrument or another hobby. Let's say we like to paint, or whatever it is. All of those things that support us as learners. On top of that, how many hours in the day are we spending to support the relationships that are important in our lives, in your child's life? And by the way, this could be online time, like Zoom chatting with grandparents who are far away, or offline, just playing outside with neighbors and friends. So now you add all those up, and now you'll see there'll probably be time left over. It is okay for that time left over to be spent on screens. There's no problem with that, especially because your child sees, I have done all of these things that are really actually good for me and important for me. But just because there's time left over does not mean they spend all of it on screens. That is where your rules and the tools that we talked about earlier need to come into play. So one idea that I might suggest with that time left over is, especially with younger ones, creating an activity menu, or writing ideas of what they can do with their time, folding them up on pieces of paper, putting them in a box, having them pull out of it and say, here's what I'm going to do, with my time left over. And some of it could be screens and some of it not. And that's perfectly fine. But again, the point is making sure your children know, and you have conversations as a family. It's really important that we do all of these other things too in a given day. I will, in closing this section on being online, this is all about setting a good example. It's going to be really hard to enforce some of the things and behaviors we expect of our children if we don't do these ourselves. So what rules do you have for yourself? You can share that in the chat. What rules do you have for yourself when it comes to technology? Is there a way that you stop, if you work from home, let's say, that you stop work and start home life? Do you have any rules about using screens before bedtime? No worries if you don't have any. I see some people are laughing about rules, but it's great. Okay, it's fine if you're honest and you don't actually have any rules, but think about that, and think about your relationship with technology and whether you feel you have struck a good balance or not. All right. And how do you model the behavior that you want to see your kids following? For us, it's not at the dinner table. Phone is not at the dinner table, or when we're talking to each other, screen is face down. It shows respect, and you won't be distracted by the screen. At least that's our rule anyway in our house. Okay, great. Okay, good. I like how some of you are using the settings to turn off the nighttime setting. Good. Let's talk about being safe. And again, if you have questions, please go ahead and put them in the chat, and I'll get to them when we have a breaking point here. So let's talk about privacy settings. The first obvious one here is make sure you're using them, make sure your kids are using them on their devices. Use the highest level that you can that still allows you to use the device or app the way you want. But I want to talk about something about privacy settings. And here I'm just showing you screenshots. This is Fortnite. Anybody's kids use Fortnite? Mine actually has aged out of it. But it was quite popular in our house for some time, especially because of those dances, the dances that the characters did. So, in this particular example here, it was not on by default. So you've got to set the privacy settings the way you want. I encourage you to, every time your kid gets a new app or game or device, have them look for the privacy settings with you. See how long it takes them to find them and look at them together. So they get in the habit of going to that first every time they download a new app or device, even into their later years as adults. We should also be doing that every time we download a new app or use a new device. But here's the thing about privacy. And when used to have the opportunity to go into schools and talk with kids, this is one of my favorite parts of the day when we talked about this. So privacy settings are great because they help make sure that strangers can't see what we're doing. Only the people we want to see it will see it. But when you download and there's all this legal text, right? Nobody reads it, thousands of words long. We scroll right past it all. We go right to the bottom and we hit I accept or I agree, right? Or maybe some of you there actually do read it. The thing is, somewhere in that legal language, written in very legal language, not in easy to understand language, there is a clause in almost every free app we're using. And that phrase basically says, you own everything you're doing on here, everything you post on here, but we have the right to use it whenever, wherever, forever. So when we talk about privacy settings, we are protecting ourselves from people out there we don't know. But privacy settings do absolutely nothing to protect any privacy between us and the company who developed that app. When we tell kids, don't post that stuff online because it really isn't private, this is the reason why. We're not just trying to scare them. And I basically call this conversation, what does it really mean to be free? What does it really mean when an app is free online? Is it truly free? And I'll tell you, if you have this conversation with your kids, especially those in the 10, 11, 12 ranges, they're already pretty aware that they're paying with not money, but with their personal information. That is the exchange. That is the business of free on the internet. And I think it's if you haven't had that conversation with your kids yet, you should have that conversation, because I feel that has really stirred more thought from the students I've engaged with than it is for me to just lecture, hey, don't post anything like that because a stranger might see it. This is the reason why things are truly not private. These companies are collecting it, they're storing it, they are they're not necessarily just passing it on to advertisers, but they're analyzing it in a way that is meaningful to advertisers who fund them, right? So this is an important part of privacy that I encourage you to have conversations about with your children. They should understand why something truly is not free on the internet. On protecting their personal information from cyber criminals, I would just say this: these criminals aren't necessarily targeting your kids. They might be, simply because cyber criminals go where all the people are. So if your children use search engines, you can see the work of cyber criminals there. They put up fake websites. The latest is Squid Game, by the way. There are a lot of hoax websites about Squid Game streaming of the show, which is not real, right? Or it's a farce so that you'll download malicious software instead. They see their work in these suspicious pop-up ads. I often poll children to say, have you ever seen a really weird text come through? And they'll say, yes. It said that if I give my email address, I will win an Xbox. The good news is your children actually have a sense of suspicion, and we should encourage them to trust their instincts that if it looks too good to be true, it probably is. And if it seems a little dodgy, not to tap on it, click on it, or give it any personal information. I would also encourage you to, again, make sure that security software is on every device that your kids are using, because they could accidentally click on something or tap on something and that they didn't mean to. The second thing I would advise is if they feel they made a mistake, they might have clicked on that thing, especially if it's your desktop that you also use for filing your taxes or do banking on, that the lines of communication are open so they can come to you and say, oh, mom, dad, I think I did something bad, And again, if you're using security software and they clicked on that thing, they're going to be blocked from going there anyway, so you'll be safe. But if for some reason you still feel like they've made a mistake and you may have downloaded something that they didn't mean to, you can use free tools like we have one called Housecall. It's a free scanning tool, housecall.trendmicro.com. It'll just scan your system to let you know if there's any malware on the system at all. Okay. Right, before I go on to this next question, I see a number of questions here in the Q&A. If you would like to submit a question in Spanish, you can write it in Spanish here, and Marcela will help me, excuse me, translate it. So just to reiterate, yes, this is being recorded, and whoever organized the event at your school is going to receive the recording link. So yes, you will be getting access to the recording of tonight. Okay. So here is a question. What age is it that they age out of Fortnite, and what was the replacement? That's a good question. There's really no upper age limit. What I saw personally was at about the entering into high school, 8th grade, beginning of 8th grade. I've seen boys start to move on to and want to use things like, gosh, some of the other similar games that are a little bit older, and it's escaping me now for some reason. Well, it'll come back to me in a second, but I'll come back to that. The thing that Fortnite did really well that some of the other sort of older games that are similar with first-person shooter kind of games that are maybe a little more graphic, but not too much, they all started to adopt Fortnite's Battle Royale. So what I like about that is there's an end goal. It's not just a game that goes on and on forever, right? You you try and beat everyone. You try to be the last person standing, basically, and then the game ends. And so some of those other older games have started to adopt the same idea as Fortnite, which I think is a real nod to Fortnite, because Fortnite is far more friendly to the younger ones than some of those other first-person shooter games. See other questions here. Are guest networks more apt to be hit by cyber attacks? That's a good question. And I would say, I don't know if I have a perfect answer for that. I'd love to get back to you on that. I think we should assume that any networks can be equally susceptible to this, which is why the devices themselves should all be protected. That's why any device, no matter which network it's on, should have protection on it. Okay. All right. I'm going to try and get to some of these others later on and just keep moving forward on the questions here. So I want to ask you another question. Do any of your children have their own cell phone? You can use the poll to answer yes, no, not yet, but soon, or not for a few more years. Yes, no, not yet, but soon, and not for a few more years. Go ahead and use the poll capability to answer the question. I'll tell you while I'm waiting for more answers here. Do any of your children have their own phone? We began allowing our children a phone when they moved to middle school. And in my town, it was 5th grade. But we got a prepaid Go phone through AT&T. So it was a smartphone, but limited capabilities. And we only put a certain amount of money on it. And that would tick down as time went on, or as the number of text messages they used. So we only allowed 4 phone numbers on it right at the beginning. And then as they got older, we had conversations about, can I add so-and-so to my phone? Can I add so-and-so to my contact list? And then can I now have Snapchat? Can I now have Instagram as they got older, and so on? So it's just something to think about when you are considering a phone for your kids. So I'm going to end the poll here. It looks like most of you, the majority of you, has said yes, with another group of you, big group of you saying, the rest of you saying no right now. But I know that eventually all of you will be in that yes column, which is just life. So I don't want to talk about the phone per se. What I do want to talk about is one thing about that phone that every kid loves: the camera. And we should definitely encourage the use of that camera in fun, harmless ways, taking videos of your dog or pictures of friends and family and so on, having fun with the filters and that kind of stuff. I do want to encourage, however, that you have a conversation about when that camera is turned on yourself. Okay. And I am talking about selfies, but not specifically. I'm talking about if they ever feel pressure to take a photo of themselves that they would not want the whole world to see. And I can't quite tell all of the ages of people listening tonight, so I don't want to use any terminology that might be not appropriate, but I think many of you might not know what I'm talking about. We should really encourage our children to never feel pressured to take a picture of themselves that they would not want the whole world to see. And I bring this up because over the course of the pandemic, in working closely with the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children and another organization, nonprofit organization called Thorn, we know there has been a rise in self-produced images and videos by young kids. Whether or not they're being coerced all of the time to do it is a different issue. The point is that kids are putting themselves at risk the moment they take it, even if they never send it to anyone. Because again, if you have things automatically set to back up in the cloud from the device into the cloud, there it is. There's already a copy of it now out there, not just on their device. If they ever lost the device, or someone had access to the password to their device, they're putting themselves at risk. So they should never feel pressured to do that. And unfortunately, the age, a survey that Thorne did of among younger kids, tweens and teens, how old were you when you were first asked for one of those pictures? Starting at 9 and 10 years old. And they're very often their peers, not strangers. Their own peers are asking for this. So we as parent communities, we need to encourage our children, first of all, to not feel the pressure to send one, but also to not be the kinds of kids encouraging others to take them and send them to them. Because technically, such images, the creation, possession, and distribution of those kinds of images of underage children is technically a felony, but they're not going to prosecute two 12-year-olds the way they might if there's like a 50-year-old person asking for these images. But they are putting themselves at risk by the sheer taking of it in the first place. So please have those conversations with your kids. Encourage the positive uses of the camera, but really make sure they never feel pressure to do that, because they're putting themselves at quite a bit of risk. I was asked a question maybe 7 to 8 years ago by a father. Great question, and I want to share it with you. And he said, you know, my son is a good kid, and but what if someone sends him one of those pictures that he didn't ask for? The phone is in my name. What should I do? So my advice to you is this, and again, many school resource officers have affirmed the same, which is if that ever happens to your child, that they receive one, you should encourage your child to let you know immediately and then delete it. Okay. You don't want to be walking around with it. And if there's an investigation, they're going to know it came from this device to your child's device. They're going to know anyway that it went there. But the point is to take action upon your knowledge of it, but not to continue sending that around. Sending it around is, even if the child sent it on their own will, it does continue to make things worse for the child who sent it. And technically, you don't want to be distributing those images. If you feel comfortable enough, you know the parent of the child who sent it. If you felt comfortable to let that parent know. If you don't, and you don't even know if it's been sent to other kids in your child's school, you might want to let the administration know. But in any case, please advise your children. Make sure there's open lines of communication. They can tell you if they ever received one and delete it. Okay. On gaming, I will just say this. Anybody have kids who have a hard time separating from the game? Even when you tell them, hey, time's up, 10 more minutes, 8 more minutes. Anybody have a kid like that? Okay. So I will say this. If you have a child who struggles with the games that have no end, right, then consider some of the games that do have time limits. I'm a fan of Rocket League. Anybody know Rocket League? It's just cars. They drive cars around and they use the car to hit a big soccer ball into a net. That's it. Super fun. As you get more points, you get more colors for your car or tricks that your car can do and so on. And it just times out eventually, right? You can win more bonus time, but eventually it ends. Games like FIFA and Madden and football and NBA 2K22 or whatever, all of these games have an end. I like Minecraft. Doesn't have an end though. That's where you need to actually get involved. And if your kids are playing games that don't have ends, saying to them, hey, 10 more minutes or 20 more minutes, 10 more, counting down. I didn't mention this earlier. For those who have an Xbox, Microsoft last fall introduced a free app called Microsoft Family Setting app. So you don't have to go to the console. You can just from your phone set time limits for the Xbox from your phone while your child is in the other room, maybe playing Xbox. I recommend using that if that would be helpful for you. But more importantly, if you know your child struggles with separating, consider other kinds of games, okay? The second is that almost every game today is social. You can be playing with someone on the other side of the world. I grew up with an Atari. I played Space Invaders, and the only way that you could play with me is actually if you were sitting right next to me with the other controller, joystick. The concept of playing that with someone else on the other side of the world was not even in my realm of thinking. But today that is true of almost every game we play. So again, making sure that depending on their age, that you're okay with who they're connecting with, or setting it so that they're not connecting with anybody else. You can play against the computer. That's another way without having to play against strangers. I'm being kind, and we're going to go quicker now in these last two here. I will say that I purposely spent more time on some of those other topics based on what you told me tonight was of greatest interest to you. I will say that it's important that we encourage kindness and respect online, not only because it's the right thing. We tell kids from the minute they start preschool, kindergarten, what it means to be a good friend, good classmate, and so on. But because of all the reasons we talked about before, that things you're posting up there are really not going to be private. So people can find out that you've said something or you've liked something that seems inappropriate. Whatever we're doing, everything we do online is being tracked. Everything we click on, search, watch, download, view, everything's being recorded. So all of those actions add up to a picture of who we are. So who would people say you are if they saw all of the actions that you take online? And kindness is also respecting other people's privacies and rules and the time that they're online or not. I had a situation with a parent who told me that their daughter texted a friend and they didn't get a response back right away. So their daughter was distraught. They were convinced that that friend was really angry with them. She'd done something wrong, and only to find out the next day that was unnecessary angst because the child was not allowed to use their phone after a certain time, which is why she didn't respond to her. So we've got to talk to our kids about the fact that, hey, not everybody gets to use it the same amount of time you do. Not everyone's going to get a phone on the same ages that your kids will. Not everyone is going to be allowed on TikTok or Instagram at the same time. So stick to your rules, whatever your values are as families, but respect other families' rules as well. And, with the kindness towards oneself, as your children start to evolve into using more social media in particular, we know that, does anyone out there use Facebook? Anyone out there use Facebook? How does it feel when you post something on Facebook and it gets a ton of likes? How does it feel when you post something on Facebook? You get tons of likes and comments and, really positive things. How does that feel? It feels really good. It's really nice, right? When our children start to use social media for the first time, they may not always get any response to something they post. And unfortunately, they very often compare themselves to their peers, and they start to ask themselves, Why did theirs get so many likes, but mine did not? And how come they have more people following them and I don't? So we've got to pay attention to this, because once you say yes to social media, and at some point you will, make sure that your children know that their value is not equal to the number of likes, followers, comments, shares, none of that. We have to remind them that they should not equate their value to what is happening in social media. Okay, really important that we do that. And I know many of you, your children are younger, not on it yet, but there will be a point where they're on there, and just know, make sure you tell your children that their value is much more than what's going on in those spaces. That's what it means to be kind to oneself. Okay. So you can nurture kindness in many ways. Be there for them if something goes wrong. Make sure those lines of communication are open. And I ask you too to be prepared as parents, that you may never have to turn to these answers ever, but think about these two questions. What would you do if your child was ever bullied online? Second question is, what would you do if your child was the one being unkind to someone else online? Again, you may never have to refer to your thoughts about these two questions, but I ask you to be prepared, to know how might you respond. And in advance of those things ever happening, doing the things to help your children prevent being bullied, or making sure they're not bullying others. I like to talk about kindness and respect with younger kids as a superpower, because amazing things can happen when you use it. And that's true both offline and online. Okay. And believe it or not, good stuff does happen online. You've seen it. You've seen it on the internet. You've seen it in Facebook. You've seen it on Twitter, whatever you use. When you find those examples, please share them with your children so they know not everything that's happening online is horrible. There's still a lot of good in the world. It's just not being given the light of day to see, for others to see much. So be that light and share it. I'll close with being savvy, and this is good habits and good uses. So one of the things about the internet is it's very difficult to know what we can necessarily trust, what is real, who is real online. One little trick that actually quite a few young people are very savvy about this. If you ever see an account that wants to follow you, or you're just not sure, is that a real person or not? Because it's too easy to create. They call it catfishing, right? Someone who is pretending to be someone that they're not online. So if you're not sure, you can always do something called a reverse image search on Google. Let's say someone's using a photo of themselves that they say is them, but you could do a reverse image search on Google and just copy paste that photo to see, has it ever showed up in other places before? Is it really that person, or did they copy it from some online magazine? Another thing is, and actually this week is National Media Literacy Week. Media literacy is the skill of, basically becoming critical thinkers of the things we see on the internet. And one of the ways that you really can do that, encourage that with your kids, and they're probably talking about this in school too, just pause. When you see something, don't react, don't like it, don't share it immediately, don't even believe it immediately. You've got to learn to ask the questions. And I won't go through all of these now, but I encourage you to use the parent guide we created with the National Center for the National Association for Media Literacy Education. It goes through scenarios of a dialogue between parent and child, hey, I saw this story on some website and it says this. And it goes through scenarios how you can talk to your kids about whether or not that is a believable ad or news story, or is it a hoax or a scam. It's a good, important skill to practice. And I honestly think we as adults could probably practice this a little bit more. Have any of you, put this in the chat, have you ever looked yourself up on the internet? Do you ever look up your own name? What did you find? If you've ever looked yourself up on the internet, what did you find when you looked up your own name? I found someone with my name, Lynette Owens, who owns a really cool business in San Diego, and another Lynette Owens that you can write in prison. Neither of those people are me. Those are my cyber twins. I've also found, things that I do for work. So, but that's more my line of work. But so this is not a bad habit to encourage your kids to get into, because I've asked this question of loads of students over the years, and they tell me that they found their pictures. They found themselves in a news story because they helped to raise money for something at school. And I remember a high school senior told me she found a very unattractive picture of herself that was posted by, thankfully, somebody she knew, from a video. He took a still from a video and posted it on a different site. And she's really glad she found it because she was about to apply to college, and she asked him to take it down, reported it to the site that it was posted on. She did everything she could to make sure it was down. There are many reasons we want to do this. You don't actually have to type your name or your child's name every time. You could easily set up what's called a Google alert. You simply go to google.com/alerts, and you can type in any word, phrase, or name, and Google anytime something that is publicly indexable has been posted that matches that name or word. We'll alert you. It'll send you an email daily, weekly, however frequently you want it, to tell you when something public about you or your child or whatever it is you're searching on is posted on the internet. Okay, I use this a lot for work because I want to know the latest of what's going on with a lot of the apps that we talked about tonight. But you can use this for your kids' names as well. Okay. And the reason I bring all of that up is this number. This is a number we've been following since 2014 because the Kaplan Institute started asking in 2014. Some of your kids are already in the 15 and older range. Many of you not yet, but I want you to think about this number. This number comes from a study that asks college and university admissions officers across the country, beyond the application that your student submitted, do you look them up online? And in 2014, the answer was 25% said yes, then 30, then the next year 35, 40, and so on. 65% is as of this January, but they did change the question a couple of years ago. They didn't just say, would you look them up online? So 65% now are saying they would. They followed that up with, if you looked, what did you find? So in this particular most recent study, 58% of those who did look up students online found something that was not flattering and probably put them in the no pile. But 42% found something that sold the deal, that made them feel, yes, this is the kind of student we want. So I bring that up because, again, while we often talk to kids about what we should not do when it comes to technology, We need to think about the possibility of using the internet in positive and productive ways that can be helpful for them, others, or the world around them. One of those being if they have goals to go to college or a university at some point down the road, or even, a job that they're looking for down the road. What are people going to find about you? If you've done a great job of hiding all stuff you don't want people to see, well, they're actually going to find nothing. You're going to be invisible. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's also not necessarily helpful in some ways. So some positive potential ways that you could encourage uses among your kids, especially if they have certain things they love to do. Learning a new skill, maybe some of you learned to bake bread during the pandemic, because I didn't have the patience. That wasn't one of them during the pandemic, but I did learn to do some other things. Promoting a cause or raising money for something that they care about, maybe a local nonprofit, or someone they know is ill, they're trying to raise money for research for that illness. They can showcase their accomplishments. If they're writers, they could start a blog. Even at a young age, it could be password protected until they're ready to let the public see it. If they're a student athlete or a performer or a artist, there's certainly a lot of ways that they can use the internet to showcase those skills and those dreams that they have. But another great way is entering contests. I'm a huge fan of this because contests are great because they have a deadline. They learn to work to a deadline. There are rules around the contest. They kind of put themselves out there for someone else to look at what it is they're doing, whether it's making videos, drawing, poetry, writing, singing, performing, whatever it is. And then they may or may not win, but it doesn't matter. You can start to build a portfolio of all these things you've done, all these contests you've entered. I think it's a fantastic use. There was a parent who asked me a few years ago, my child loves making videos, but he's just not old enough to have his own YouTube channel yet. I don't know what to do. And I advised her, I said, there are so many great video contests for youth. That would be a great way to direct his energy. He could even make videos for a small local business who just needs help with advertising their business or whatever. So these are ways that I might encourage you, because that 42% one day could be your kid. And hide the stuff that you don't want the world to see. But then there are ways to showcase, hey, I've learned how to master the internet. I know how to use the internet for more than just watching kittens fall off chairs and playing Minecraft to no end. I know how to use the internet for good things too. I want to close this out by just saying that many of the things that we talked about tonight, we just launched this month our own Cyber Academy for kids. And this is a series of videos that you could have your kids watch. They're animated, 2 minutes long, followed by a Kahoot quiz after each, and accompanied by a fun coloring sheet or word find and a parent guide. So please visit us at trendmicro.com/internet safety, and you'll see the Cyber Academy. We'd love to have you use these curriculum with your children. If you're teachers out there or administrators, you absolutely can use these in the classroom, free to the public. We are about to release several more modules over time, but these are the first 5 that just came out this month. We'd love to get it. And at the end of every one, there's a survey. So we'd like to know, did you like it? Did they like it? Could we do it better? Okay. Let me just come. These are more stuff coming. So I'll say to you, thank you for being with us tonight. Stay active in this area. This isn't just about coming to this talk tonight. It's about an ongoing conversation you have with your kids, with the other parents in your community, with your school and the way they're using technology in the classroom. Continue to do stay active and communicate with each other and stay up to date. I'm going to show you some resources you can use to stay up to date. But I challenge you tonight to do one thing you had not done before tonight. Maybe it's change the password on the router, or have your kids go through that cyber academy with you. Any number of the things that we talked about today. Do one new thing. And again, thank you to all of you from across the country for being with us. These are your attendance codes. If you need them, go ahead and write them down. It's basically today's date, 10/27/21, dash a number that is unique to your school. I'll bring it up again in a second. And I'll get to questions in a minute, but the resources, many of the URLs, resources we talked through tonight, all of tonight's attendees are going to get an email with a worksheet that has all of those links on it. So you didn't need to write them all down. I'll be sending that out, including this resource page from us, has all of our tip sheets for parents in the Cyber Academy, and this resource page from PTO Today, which has even more tip sheets. They're both in English and Spanish, and our resources are actually in a number of languages as well. And again, when you close out, I'd love your feedback. My name's Lynette Owens. It does ask you for who your presenter is. And if you choose to leave your email address with your feedback, you'll automatically be entered to win a copy of our, potentially win a copy of one of our product that protects up to 5 devices in your home for a year. So you don't have to enter your email address if you don't want to. So I'm going to bring up that screen again with the codes and turn to some questions here. And feel free to leave if you'd like. I know we're a little bit over time here, but I want to make sure I get to these questions. Okay, so let's see. I'm sorry, ma'am, but it hasn't been long enough. You just told us about your free application. Now you're talking about protecting your privacy from free applications. Should we also have a talk with ourselves before we go to your free software? So I don't know how to answer this. I would say, yes, I know I went really fast through some of this material because there is quite a lot to cover under the umbrella of digital citizenship. My goal tonight was to give you a framework to think about all of the things that pertain to helping kids be great digital citizens. And it's not just about bullet number 1, which is safety and privacy. It's about so much more. And I will say that if you'd like to try our product, great. No pressure to do it whatsoever. Obviously, we're always looking to do the best we can for you in the communities we've been serving for quite some time. Let's see, other questions here. Is a hotspot on your phone VPN? No. When you turn on the hotspot on your phone, that is not necessarily VPN. No, that's just giving you connectivity to the internet that you wouldn't otherwise. So no, that's not the same thing as a VPN. You would need an actual product that the VPN protects the information flowing from your device to wherever it's going, so that someone cannot scoop it up in the middle and try and steal that personal information, like a credit card number, for example. Okay. Any other questions? Please put them in the Q&A. If you're listening in Spanish, please submit them in Spanish as well. Here's a question. I think that my provider can actually change the password on my main house router. Is that possible? I don't know if that is possible, actually. And also the way in which you change your password on your router depends on your device maker. There's so many different brands out there, so you'd have to probably search specifically on how to do that. But this is something you would need to do in your own home. What security software is available for Apple devices? There's actually quite a few out there, including Trend. But all of the main security providers, again, if you go to cnet.com and you look up the top 10, almost all of them have protection for Apple devices as well as Windows devices. And I will say there's a lot of people who believe Apple is just more secure. And in many ways, I think there's good reason for that. But you should know that no devices are 100% secure at all. So it's very important that you use security software on your devices. Google Alerts sounds like a way for Google to get information categorized more accurately about you. Again, it's free by the benevolent Google. I can understand using it for work, but not so sure about my home life. That's a good point. I will say many people bemoan how much Facebook knows about us, but I argue that Google knows way more about us than anyone. I can go many days without checking Facebook. I cannot go many days without using something from Google, whether it's the search engine, Gmail, YouTube, very few days where I'm not using a Google application. So it's a good point. I'm just saying to you that they're offering the service anytime something is alerted about you. So, and oh, I should have said this before everybody left. Just recently, Google decided to make it easy for you and anyone under the age of 18 or the parents to remove any images of your children that show up if you search for their name online. So I will add that to the sheet that I'm going to send out, but that's brand new. You have to submit a form that tells them what you're trying to remove and the link that it's being posted on. It will only remove it from search results. It does not remove it from the website that image is on. That you would have to report to that website. But if people are searching, let's say for your child's name and their picture is showing up and you don't want it showing up, you can ask Google to remove it from their search results. Again, only for those under 18. That does not apply to us as adults. We just have to be careful about what we're posting online. Okay, great. Well, I don't know if there are any other questions. I will say thank you everyone for being on tonight. I'd like to thank Marcela, my colleague, for her support for our Spanish-speaking audience. And again, the recording for tonight's event will be made available to the person who organized the event for your school community. It will be sent to them and then to you. And I appreciate you filling out the survey. Any feedback would be greatly appreciated. I look forward to seeing you in a future talk. We do update the material from time to time because, as you can see, new information is coming at us all the time. And there's quite a bit of action going on. Snapchat is about to launch a new product. They will not name it, but it is going to enable us to be able to put more privacy settings on there for our kids, but they won't unveil the name yet. So in a future talk, probably not too far from now, we'll be talking about that. This is our third event of the school year. We have about 15 to 20 more to go through May. So if you know of anyone who might want to join us at another time, visit us at trendmicro.com/internet-safety, and you'll see all of the events that we have planned in the future. Thank you so much for spending your night with us. Thank you, Marcela, and good night.